welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and as always, I am so happy to be with you, bringing you another author interview. As we get started, I do want to remind you to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this episode on. Really does help the algorithm, gets the podcast out to more readers. Greatly appreciated. If you want to help support the podcast as well as the network as a whole, you can, in a monetary fashion, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net, and there you can leave a tip. Think of it like, the cost of a coffee or the change you might find under your car seat or your couch cushions. I don't know. Whatever is greatly appreciated. It doesn't really matter the amount or the form of the support that you give. All support helps the podcast, helps the network, and is all incredibly appreciated. But if you do want to help support the podcast in a monetary fashion, as I said, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. Thank you, as always, for your support. And how is your week going? How was your Valentine's Day? If you did anything to celebrate, did we do anything to celebrate? Not really. We had a very quiet day, and that was okay. I actually walked into town to the pharmacy to, because it finally stopped raining. It rained on Friday. And I don't think it's rained since Friday. So this is the fourth day of no rain. And I shouldn't say this too much out loud because, I don't want to tempt the fates. But I did have a chance to walk into town. It's about, the way I went, about 3.5 miles round trip. So a nice walk. And I stopped by the beach and just took in the lovely sunshine and the beach. And today is Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday. Tomorrow starts the season of Lent, if that is something that you are familiar with. So that means here it is Carnival. So on Saturday when I was there, I think Saturday, Sunday, yesterday, and today were all Carnival down in our little town. And so there's a parade today that I did not make it to. I'm sad about that. I usually try to go. Just didn't quite have the energy today. But there was music and there were kids in. So Halloween isn't really a big thing here, but kids dress up for Carnival. So there were lots of children in costumes and it's just fun to see. So I did at least get to experience a little bit of that when I was in town on Saturday. Just didn't get to see the parade today. So if you are someone who celebrates Mardi Gras, observes Lent, one or the other, both. Are you doing anything today? Some people go to a pancake supper. Some people, there's a lot of things that people do for Mardi Gras. And of course, there's the actual Mardi Gras. If you are in New Orleans, please be safe. Please have fun. It's a crazy time. I've been there, but not on the actual day of Mardi Gras today. I've been there the weekend before, which is crazy enough for me. I know it gets progressively crazier until boom, done. Lent starts and the party is over. But I hope you are having fun and being safe. And by the time you listen to this, you're probably already done because why would you take time out of Mardi Gras to listen to this podcast? I'm babbling. I just wanted to see how your weekend was, tell you it stopped raining, share my experience of going to the beach and seeing kids in costume. And I kind of went off on a tangent. If you've been here for any length of time, you know that this is very common for me. Thank you for bearing with me. We are, of course, here to talk about books, and I am here to speak with an author. And so let's go ahead and talk about that. And I will introduce you to the person and the book with whom I am speaking and the book about which we are discussing. That was such a bad sentence. I apologize. Again, I'm going to take a deep breath. We're going to try this again. I'm speaking this week with author Judith Lissauer Cromwell about her biography, Louise-Élisabeth Vigée Le Brun, and I'm going to give you the description of that book, which is as follows. This biography follows the remarkable life of Louise-Élisabeth Vigée Le Brun, whose portraits of European royalty and nobility hang in many of the world's most important galleries. As a young woman in the male-dominated society of late 18th century France, she was denied an artistic education and forced to nurture her passion outside the restrictions of conventional schooling. Vigée Le Brun's vibrant art, in addition to her charm and beauty, caught the attention of Queen Marie Antoinette, who honored her as her chosen painter. At the pinnacle of her fame and fortune, however, the revolution forced Vigée Le Brun to flee old regime old regime France, leaving everything behind except her only child. Drawn from her memoirs, archival research, and re-examination of the judgment of her contemporaries, this book portrays a single working mother who survived because of her cachet, charisma, and artistic talent. Cast on a storm-tossed continent, solely reliant on her palette, Vigée Le Brun produced some of her major works during her 12-year exile, returning to France to continue her work after Napoleon had restored stability. Her story is one of triumph, adversity, perseverance, and ultimately peace. And so that, as you heard, is the description of Louise-Élisabeth Vigée Le Brun, Portrait of an Artist, 1755 to 1842. And she really was a remarkable woman. I think, as I said last week, I was trying to remember if this is the first biography I've talked about on the podcast with the author. I've always loved biographies. I read them as a child. I've continued reading them. I've been fascinated with people's lives, and so I was really excited to read this one. And actually, as I was looking at the books that we've done just this year in 2026, this is the third nonfiction book we've done already. Out of 6 interviews, this is the third nonfiction book that I have done this year, which is 50%. It's usually much lower, and as the year progresses, we'll probably go back to that statistic. But it's kind of fun to have had an equal number of fiction and nonfiction so far in 2026. But Vigée Le Brun was a really interesting woman, and I have seen some of her paintings. I mean, if you've seen a portrait of Marie Antoinette, chances are good you have seen one of Vigée Le Brun's works. But I didn't know anything about her. I'd never heard her name. I don't know that I ever really thought about who painted the portraits that I was looking at. And that often happens, unless it's someone really famous and we just already know their name. How often do you think about who painted the portrait that you're looking at? Maybe that's the way your brain works, and that is the first thing that you think of. But I had never really thought about it. So to find out that she was a woman, a very young woman, because she was a teenager actually when she started painting for Marie Antoinette quickly decided that she really liked Vigée Le Brun's style, and they were friendly. They traveled in different social circles, of course, Marie Antoinette being the queen, and so they weren't friends per se because of the restrictions of society, but they were very friendly. They had things in common. They enjoyed each other's company, so they did develop a close relationship. Of course, that led to issues then when the revolution happened and Vigée Le Brun did flee France with her daughter Julie. They were in exile for 12 years until at least Vigée Le Brun felt safe enough to return to France. Julie did not return with her at that time. She had gotten married. We'll talk a little bit about that in the interview, but this is just a portrait of the life of a really fascinating woman, and one that I didn't know anything about. So I was very excited to read about her and learn more about her life and see a glimpse of that very tumultuous time of history through the eyes of she wasn't exactly a common person because she was quite famous in Paris at the time and throughout Europe. She was very well known even in North America because her paintings were sent, her portraits were sent to embassies and capitals and different places around the world, around Europe and North America at least. So people were familiar with her work, and I am glad and excited that Judith has written this biography, so hopefully more people can become familiar with her as well. Let's go ahead and let Judith talk about this book and why she chose Vigée Le Brun and the research and everything that went into crafting this biography. Again, the book is Louise-Élisabeth Vigée Le Brun, and the author is Judith Lissauer Cromwell. Hi, Judith. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. We're going to talk about your biography today, but before we get to the book, if you would take just a moment to introduce yourself, that would be wonderful.
I am Judith Lissauer Cromwell. I live in New York City, and I have, for the past several years, had a lot of fun researching and writing the lives of prominent women who made a difference in European history.
That does sound like fun. And we're going to talk about one of those women today, but maybe we'll touch on some of the other people that you've written about. Okay, so I'm going to have you say the name of the book, because I took French, but my French accent is terrible. So would you be so kind as to say the name of the woman we're talking about?
Louise-Élisabeth Vigée Le Brun.
Okay. So I actually
commonly known as Vigée Le Brun.
Right.
That was her surname.
Yeah. I was doing okay then in my pronunciation.
Not that complicated.
It's not, but I think I was trying to make it more complicated than it is. So thank you. So what about Louise-Élisabeth Vigée Le Brun inspired you to write her biography?
One of my hobbies is art, but I'd never heard of this painter.
Mm-hmm.
Until the Metropolitan Museum in New York had a retrospective of her work. It got great reviews, and I thought, well, okay, I'll go and see the exhibit. I was really blown away by her paintings and her life. The brief biography that they posted about her life was fascinating. And I thought, I was working on my previous book, but I said, this woman, this exceptional woman, is going to be the subject of my next book.
Yeah.
So that's what inspired me. I really didn't know anything about her. So
I didn't either. And she really did have quite an extraordinary life.
Yes, and she was very well known. She was famous throughout Europe and North America. So she had there's a lot to say about her.
Yes. And I think even if people have never heard of her, probably if they've seen a picture of Marie Antoinette, one of her portraits, they actually do know this artist, because as I was looking at some of her work, I'm like, oh yes, I know that picture. Never thought about who painted it.
Yes, she painted over 40 portraits of Marie Antoinette, and they were sent all over North America and Europe because she was the Queen of France. She sent many of them of the paintings to her friends, and the government sent several of them to embassies overseas. Yeah. So that gave Vigée Le Brun a wide exposure and a lot of fame because she was known as Marie Antoinette's favorite artist.
Yes.
So it was also had its downside, but it had its upside too, like everything.
Yes.
Good things and bad things.
So I mentioned in my introduction how well known Vigée Le Brun was during her lifetime, that she was well known in North America, she was well known across the continent of Europe, and it really is amazing to me how well known she was and how she's just kind of quietly faded. Not very many people know about her. If you were one of the people that know about her and you're sitting there thinking, I know about her, well, that's actually really cool. But in my very unscientific, very brief survey of people I've spoken to since I started reading this book, no one had heard of her. And that doesn't mean anything. Like I said, very unscientific, but it's amazing to me how people, even well-known people, can fade over time, even though her work still exists. And that's the good thing, is that her works still exist. You can see them. You can see them in person in some places. You can see pictures of them, of course, but at any rate, we're going to take our first break of this episode. When we come back, Judith will give a bit of an overview of Vigée Le Brun's life. It's a very, very long life. She lived to be 84, and she did a lot. So you can't give the whole thing because you have to read the book for that, of course, but at least an overview of that life. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute. I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning. Oh, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Judith Lissauer Cromwell. We are talking about her biography of Louise-Élisabeth Vigée Le Brun. As we get into this second segment, I do want to give you your second and final reminder that you can help the podcast and the network as a whole by going to gsmcpodcast.net and helping in a financial way. If you are of a mind to do so, thank you as always for your support. Before the break, Judith was giving a very brief overview of this book and Vigée Le Brun. So let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Judith.
She really did have an extraordinary life, but can you give sort of the elevator pitch of her life for people to just have a small introduction to her?
Well, one has to start at the beginning. As a child, she had of five. She had an ambition to be a great artist, and she went about it. She poured her ambition and talent and bravery into becoming one. The meeting with Marie Antoinette was unusual because the Queen of France was the daughter of the Empress of Austria, and she had left home, Marie Antoinette, at 14 to marry the then Crown Prince of France, the Dauphin. And her mother wanted to see a picture of her as a queen, in full court dress as a queen. She hadn't seen this daughter, her youngest daughter, since she was 14. So Marie Antoinette spent 10 years trying to have a portrait done that would satisfy her mother and that would satisfy her. I read the correspondence between the two women, and Marie Antoinette said, I had the best painter in Paris paint my portrait. It was so awful, I didn't even send it to you.
Yeah.
And those that she did send, her mother said, were no good. So it was really... Marie Antoinette was at her wit's end. She wanted to please her mother. So finally, she decided to try a young woman artist who had become the fashion in Paris. Vigée Le Brun was summoned to the palace, and she painted a portrait of the Queen in full court dress as the Queen of France, and Marie Antoinette sent it to her mother, and mother was ecstatic. She said, I love your portrait, your large portrait. And that success, it was a joint success. The Queen had chosen and the artist had come through. So that joint success forged a bond between the two women. And was really the genesis of their relationship. They became friends, as much friends as two women of two such disparate social classes could be. But Marie Antoinette liked to be surrounded with contemporaries who were good-looking and charming and talented. And Marie Vigée Le Brun fit that bill perfectly.
Yeah.
And so they got on very well together.
Yeah.
And aside from the paintings that pleased the Queen.
One thing that surprised me about Vigée Le Brun was how much she painted.
Yeah.
When I think of a painting a portrait, in my mind it takes a very long time to do and get right and do well. And Vigée Le Brun sounds like she just painted prolifically all the time, so much.
She did. She was a very hard-working painter. And part of that was driven by the fact that she needed money. At the beginning of her career, really, she felt she had to support her family. Her father died when she was 12, and she was devastated by his death. But she felt she had to support the family. He didn't leave. He was also an artist, and he made enough money to provide his family with a good living, but he didn't leave any money. And she felt she had to carry on that responsibility of sending her younger brother to school and maintaining the household. So she set her mind to painting portraits because that paid. It was the only way you could get a picture of yourself in those days. No cameras, no nothing. So it was it was a popular genre, and one that was acceptable for women to do. Not all of them were, but this was. So she painted to earn money. And unfortunately, she never got to keep it, but it got to the point where she didn't care. Her husband took all her money. It was not a happy marriage. It was a partnership. It was not a happy marriage. He philandered. He had expensive mistresses. He gambled. He gambled away his money and hers. But it was a partnership. He allowed her to be a painter, which was also unusual for those days, because women didn't really have careers. So she painted for pleasure and also to keep peace at home. And later in her life, she admitted that she would have liked to do something else than paint portraits or other paintings that she wished she had been able to do. But reality is reality. Life, you can't always do what you want.
But she managed to walk kind of a fine line between being a very traditional French woman and maintaining that role and her place in society, but also being very groundbreaking in that she did have a career and she did paint.
Yes.
Marie Antoinette's favorite portrait painter.
Yes, and she always she never kind of tried to hide the fact that she was a woman. She was a very committed and proud mother. She had one child, and she portrayed herself as a mother in several of her paintings, some of her most illustrious paintings, as a mother. So that was her way of expressing her femininity, because the marriage was not a good marriage. She couldn't very well back on that, but or count on it. But she could express her femininity that way, and she did. And yes.
So, and you extensively quote from her memoirs. So that must have been some really interesting reading. Can you talk a little bit about some things that maybe surprised you from her memoir?
Well, by the time I got to her memoirs, well, first you have to go back to why she wrote them. She lived to be 85, and in her late 70s, she decided to write her memoirs. She didn't really want to, because writing was work. She wanted to enjoy life finally. But her friends convinced her to write her memoirs. They said, if you don't do it, someone else is going to do it, and you won't be happy with the results. She had suffered a lot of calumny, slurs, lies about her all her life because she was a successful woman in a man's world, and also her association with Marie Antoinette. You know, she got a huge amount of mud slung at her, and some of it spattered on Vigée Le Brun. So she wanted to set the record straight and write her life story the way she wanted posterity to remember her, her last self-portrait. So reading that, I read it sort of towards the end of my research, so I was already familiar with her life. But what came through, what was surprising, I thought, was her personality really came through. She was a very lively, charming woman. And that really came through in the memoirs. It was almost like reading a novel, all 3 volumes of it.
Yeah.
And I read it in English and in French.
Okay.
It was like reading a novel. You know, you almost couldn't put it down, even though I knew what was going to happen.
Right.
And that was her.
Yeah.
That was her personality. So that was the most surprising thing.
Even in just some of the quotes that you have at the beginning of the chapters, you can, even with those brief snippets, you can still feel her personality come through.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course she covered up certain things, and she well, she gilded the lily in some places. But that, you know, that was okay. And you have to read it with a grain of salt. That's why I waited till almost to the end, till I was really familiar with her life before I read the memoirs.
Yeah.
So, of course, Vigée Le Brun would have written her memoir to put herself in the best possible light, because she was trying to leave a legacy for herself and her paintings, but she wanted that legacy to say what she wanted it to say, just like anybody who would write a memoir about themselves, no matter how impartial or how we feel like we're being very clear about our life and our motives. If we're writing about ourselves, we're going to present things in certain ways, and we may remember things differently than the way other people would remember them. That's no different for Vigée Le Brun. So it makes absolute sense that Judith would read that last and really do a lot more research beforehand, and then read so she could hear, as you do in your head when you're reading something, but hear Vigée Le Brun's voice and how she told her own story. We're going to go ahead and take our second break of this episode. When we return, we'll be talking about some of the translations that are done. The memoir, of course, was written in French, and a lot of the research would have been in French. So we'll be talking about translations. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review podcast and my conversation with author Judith Lissauer Cromwell. We, of course, are talking about her biography of Louise-Élisabeth Vigée Le Brun. And before the break, Judith was talking about reading Vigée Le Brun's memoir and how she waited till the end of her research to read that and hear how Vigée Le Brun presented herself through that memoir. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Judith.
And I think in your introduction to the book, you say that all the translations are yours. So you are fluent in French?
Yes. Well, in reading and writing, I'm pretty fluent. Speaking, I'm very slow. I can understand pretty much everything, but I'm slow in speaking.
Yeah, I can understand that. Reading is much easier, so I can understand.
Right. You can go at your own pace. You can look up words if you're not quite sure. So, yeah.
Yes, you've mentioned that she did have a lot of slurs thrown her way. There was mudslinging, but are there any particular misconceptions about her that you wanted to correct in your writing?
The major misconception is that she's not well known today, and
Mm,
she deserves to be.
yeah.
She deserves to be because her paintings had a twofold famous for two reasons. One is because she painted many of the movers and shakers of Europe at a time when Europe was on the cusp of the modern era. It was a very important time of the French Revolution. So she painted many of the men who made the revolution, or more tried to prevent the revolution. And she also painted, she didn't only paint aristocrats, she painted musicians and artists and writers. So she really painted a picture of her time.
Mhm.
And so that's one reason why she should be remembered.
Yeah.
But second reason is that her most illustrious works are good enough to hang in any major art collection, and many of them do.
Yeah.
So for that two reasons, she should be remembered, and if she really isn't, so that's what I hope to correct with my book.
Yeah. For people who aren't familiar with her or her portraits, is there one in particular that they should look up to kind of have an introduction to her?
Well, that depends on where they are. If they're in a capital where there are paintings of hers on display in a museum, then they should go to that museum and look. But that's, well, New York, London, Paris, their museums have her paintings on view. And there are also maybe 15 museums in cities across the US that have at least one of her paintings.
Mhm.
There are also other cities in Europe besides the capitals I mentioned that have her paintings. But I think the best place to start is really to look at my book, because I have 40 illustrations. Some of them are in color. And I picked them very carefully for two reasons. One, they were important in Vigée Le Brun's life, and two, they were examples of her most illustrious works. So I think if you just leaf through there and something catches your eye that you find interesting, that's the place to start.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite?
It's hard to say. I think maybe one of my favorites is called Julie Le Brun Looking in a Mirror. Julie was her daughter. She painted a lot of paintings of her. She was about 5 years old. The Metropolitan Museum in New York, I think, owns it. And last time I was there, had it on view in the European Paintings Gallery. And she catches a little girl's fascination with herself so well. It's really remarkable. So that's one of the paintings. Of course, a very famous painting, perhaps, is called Marie Antoinette en gaule, which means Marie Antoinette in a muslin dress. That caused a sensation when it was exhibited, because the Queen was not supposed to wear muslin dresses. Many people did. It was becoming the fashion, and the Queen wanted to be to paint it that way. So, but it didn't show. Many people, and French people anyway, were shocked, because the Queen was supposed to be in stiff, formal clothes. She wasn't supposed to be painted as a woman. It was more of a symbol, mother of France. And so the painting caused a sensation, but it was accepted eventually, and it was very popular. Marie Antoinette. So maybe that one. I think it's in a museum in Vienna. That painting it has a story behind. Most of them do, but this painting has a story behind it. So maybe that's also a good place to start.
I agree. I mentioned earlier that I was amazed at how prolific she was, how many paintings that she did. But one thing that I was amazed and happy about is how many of her paintings still exist. So many were sent out. And I say that because during the revolution, I know a lot of artwork was destroyed. And since she did paint Marie Antoinette and people in Marie Antoinette's circle, I would imagine that some of those works would have been in danger of being destroyed.
One of her works, actually a famous one, it also has a big story behind it, was called Marie Antoinette and Her Children. It shows the Queen with her two living children at the time. And it was a major painting, and that was stored away. It was hidden at the Palace of Versailles during the Revolution because, well, for obvious reasons, there were people who were royalists who did not want to have the painting destroyed. And it was kept in its own room. And after the revolution, when things had calmed down, Napoleon did not want to have the painting shown, also for obvious reasons. But Vigée Le Brun was able to see it because she had connections at the Louvre and at Versailles, and she was able to see it. And after she at the end of her life, she left certain of her paintings to the Louvre, and she designated that one as should go. But she described going to see it, and the man who showed it to her was in a small room, and one of the custodians was in charge. And when she left, she wanted to give him a tip. And he said, no, he said, I get plenty of those from people who want to see this painting, which I owe to you. So no, thank you.
Wow.
So some of them were hidden. I'm sure some of them were destroyed, but some of them were hidden.
Okay.
I haven't done as much reading on the French Revolution as I've done on some other periods of history, but I've had some historical fiction on the authors on the podcast that have talked about that time period. And unfortunately, right now, the name of the book escapes me. Maybe you heard that interview. It was a dual timeline, but part of it was set during the revolution. But whenever I read any of those kind of times of political unrest in historical periods, there's often the destruction of art, right? And that always makes me sad that we're losing those images of life as it was before those major events took place. I'm glad to hear that some of Vigée Le Brun's works were hidden. Maybe some were destroyed, not really sure, but it is good to know that some at least were hidden and were saved. And then of course there were so many that were sent to so many different parts of the world, North America and Europe, and those of course would still be in existence. At any rate, we're going to take our next break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about the result of the revolution, at least for Vigée Le Brun, which was sending her into exile. We'll be talking about that experience for her. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Judith Lissauer Cromwell. Before the break, we were talking about the revolution and the fact that at least one painting of Marie Antoinette was hidden in a janitor's closet and saved that way, and that people then came to see it. Vigée Le Brun went to visit herself after the revolution, after she returned from exile. We're going to talk more about her life in exile. So let's return to the conversation with Judith.
Can you talk a little bit more about her life in exile? Because she was, during the time of the revolution, she did flee with her daughter. And so she was 12 years in exile. Can you talk about that period of her life?
She, at the height of her fame and fortune, she had to leave because she feared for her life. Mm-hmm. And she left with nothing except her daughter. No money, no jewelry. The only thing she had was her talent and her fame. And she knew once she was out of France, she would be able to use that to create a new life. And that is, in fact, what happened. She went to Rome first because all artists, Rome was the mecca for every aspiring artist. Mm-hmm. And she'd never been able to go because she was a woman. Mm-hmm. Women just didn't travel alone at that time. She did, but it was forced on her. She had to leave, and she went on the common carriage, just like a bus. It's a very slow bus, all the way to the south of France, and practically to the border with Italy. And then she traveled through Italy and till she got to Rome. She wanted to see Rome too, and she wanted to see Florence and all the. In fact. Going to Italy opened her eyes, literally. She'd born and brought up in Paris. She'd barely left the city, only if clients invited her who lived in the country or had country estates invited her. So she really hadn't seen anything. But Italy opened her eyes not only to the glories of the Renaissance and classical antiquity, but also to nature. She saw the Alps and she was really impressed. She grew to love nature. And anyway, she went to Rome. She lived in Italy for 3 years. She didn't stay in Rome. She went to Naples, which was a major capital of an independent country at that time. Mm-hmm. And then back to Rome. And she was getting ready after 3 years. She was getting ready to return to France when the news came that the king and queen had fled Paris and were caught at the border and had to go back to Paris as prisoners, basically. And that was the beginning of the Reign of Terror. So obviously she couldn't go back, and she didn't know where to go. At this time, she was in Milan. She wanted to see the art that was there and see the mountains. And the Austrian ambassador at Milan said, "Why don't you go to Vienna? You'll have a welcome there. Marie Antoinette came from Vienna. There'll be plenty of people who'll be willing to give you commissions. You can wait out the upheaval in France in Vienna." So she went to Vienna, and she was very happy there. She found a society almost like Paris. There were plenty of emigres there, and she liked Vienna. But she heard from a very good friend and from others as well about Russia. And it sounded very tempting. She wanted to paint Catherine the Great. Mm-hmm. And she decided to go. And wherever she went, I mean, she traveled, as you can tell, all over. Wherever she went, she would make a detour to a city that had an art gallery with famous paintings in it. That's how she learned. She originally taught herself by copying famous artists, by looking at famous artists and viewing their work. And she used that all her life. She never stopped learning. So she went to Russia. Most people had never been there before. It was kind of unknown.
Yeah.
And she stayed there for 6 years until Napoleon came and stabilized France, and she felt she could go back. So she was out of the country for 12 years. She continued her career. She became even more famous than she had been before. Everybody who was anybody knew Vigée Le Brun. She knew all the luminaries. She painted many of them in the world of culture, society, politics. She knew a lot of people, and she came back to France. She was a feminine icon, really,
Yeah.
during her lifetime.
She really did have an amazing life. Some of it kind of accidentally, like, having to flee, but then getting to see the world.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have a happy marriage, and her daughter died at, I think, 39. Is that correct?
Yes, her daughter was really the tragedy of her life. She adored her daughter. She took her along when she left France. She poured a lot of money into her education. She poured a lot of love into Julie. She was always with her, included her in everything. And in Russia, Julie fell in love with a handsome, I guess you could say, non-entity. Vigée Le Brun said he had neither fortune nor prospects nor a name. So she was not happy about it. And but there was nothing she could do. Julie was at that age. She was 19, headstrong. She wanted to marry him. So her mother finally had to give in, but the quarrel between them brought out Julie's less than attractive qualities, and she was really horrible to her mother, and it caused a rift that never healed. I mean, Vigée Le Brun, she wrote in her memoir, she didn't really, in her memoir, she didn't really express her feelings a lot. But with Julie, the business with Julie, she said, is my daughter. I only have one child. I love her in spite of her failings. And Vigée Le Brun supported them while the young couple, while she was in Russia. She gave Julie a huge dowry, and she left money when she went home to France. But the marriage did not turn out well, and Julie died in Paris at far too young, of syphilis.
Yeah.
So it was a tragedy, and Vigée Le Brun never really spoke about it, but you could tell, I mean, from what one knows about her life and what kind of a person she was. It was the tragedy of her life.
Yeah.
That her daughter turned out that way.
Yeah, absolutely. What, besides knowing Vigée Le Brun and her amazing accomplishments, what do you hope readers will take away from this biography?
Well, what I mentioned before, the importance of her paintings, for the reasons I already gave you, plus the fact that she was a child or a young woman who had a dream, and she followed it. She really poured everything she had, and she had courage to overcome the obstacles that existed for a woman to be an artist. She overcame everything. She didn't just sit around and say, well, I can't do this because she was determined.
Yeah.
And she achieved her goal. and she carried it to unprecedented heights. She made the genre of portraiture. She made it, basically.
Yeah.
She took it to unprecedented heights, and her painting, that's what I'd like people to take away, that this was a woman who persisted in following her dream, and she didn't revolt, and she didn't make a lot of noise, but she worked within the system.
Yeah.
And she was able to accomplish what she wanted.
She's kind of the epitome of that quote, nevertheless, she persisted.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that, well, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. What are you working on now?
Well, since Vigée Le Brun was my fourth biography of an important woman, of course, I'm working on another one. Also a woman who made a difference in European history, Empress Maria Theresa.
Okay. Yes. I can imagine that the research for that has got to be extensive and fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
So is writing something that you've always wanted to do? Did you how did you decide to write, especially biographies, for publication?
I come across a woman in college. I was a history major, and her letters, this woman's letters, she wrote, had corresponded with all the prominent men, politicians of her day. She lived at the beginning of the 19th century. And certain historians, those that noticed her, said she had a lot of power. It was because she corresponded with these men, and she also slept with them. And I thought to myself, there's got to be more to her than that.
Yeah.
Also more to the men who corresponded with her. But I was in college, so I couldn't really do anything about it, about doing more research. But I was always determined to write a biography of her. And when I had to choose a subject for my doctorate, I wasn't allowed to do that because, you have to pick a very narrow subject.
Right.
and my advisor said, it's far too broad a topic. So that was always in the back of my mind. And when I worked in the corporate world for over 20 years, and when I left, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and that was to write this biography, which I did. It was an arduous process, not the research, which I love to do, and the writing, but I'd never written anything for a commercial audience before. I'd written plenty of reports for my work, but nothing like this. So I had to learn how to write that kind of what would sell a book.
Yeah.
And find a publisher, which also wasn't easy because she wasn't well known, my subject, and I wasn't well known. But anyway, I finally did find a publisher. And that kind of whetted my appetite for, I said to myself when it was published, what am I going to do now? So, well, I'll write another book.
Yeah.
And that's what got me started. I'd never set out to write books.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
But life,
yeah.
You have to be flexible. Life, to deal with what life deals you. And that's what happened.
Yeah. So I think you have to be flexible would be great advice. What other advice would you give to someone who is considering writing?
Oh, I think you have to have an idea, and you have to believe in it. And you can't give up. It isn't easy to find a publisher. And if your book is good enough, you are going to find somebody who'll undertake to publish it.
Mhm.
So this is like Vigée Le Brun. If you have a goal, keep after it. Don't give up.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah.
I like that Judith included Vigée Le Brun, what Vigée Le Brun might have said if she was giving advice, and that would apply to painting, but writing, whatever you have in life, often advice is applicable to many instances, and it is in this case. If you have a goal, just do whatever you can to achieve that. Just be persistent and keep going after it and make it happen. And you never know what might happen, because I doubt Vigée Le Brun had any idea when she began painting portraits and when she was very single-minded about painting those portraits, just how far her career was going to go and how her fame would spread. We're going to take our final break of this episode. When we come back, what Judith reads. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review podcast and my conversation with author Judith Lissauer Cromwell. Before the break, Judith was giving her advice for writers, but also advice that could be applied in a lot of different areas of people's lives. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Judith.
I'm sure you read a lot for research, obviously, because you write biographies, and that's a lot of research. But what about just for you? What kind of authors and genres do you turn to for reading?
I like fiction, but it has to be literate and good, well written and good. And I like history, reading history. Again, something that interests me. Not all history, but some history books are better than others.
I was also a history major, so I agree. Some history books are just trying, I think, to make people hate history. They're
right,
so hard to
but
read.
some are very well done.
Very well
those
done.
I like to read.
Yeah, me too. So if people want to know more about you and your books, I know you have a website. So if you can give your website and then any social media that you're active on.
I'm not active on social media, but my website is called judithcromwell.com. And if people want to know more about me, that's the place to go. Also, read my books. I think everything you write reveals something about you, even if you don't set out to do it, to do that, but it just does.
Yeah.
So those are the two places.
Thank you. Judith, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure you highlighted during our time together?
Well, yes, I think Vigée Le Brun faced serious obstacles to becoming an artist because she was a woman. She was not allowed to take life classes with the boys because females were considered too modest to look on the male nude. And she was not allowed to go to the school where the boys learned perspective and how to create a composition, things like that, because she was a woman. And it was thought that the subjects that were taught at that school would harm her ability to reproduce, to have children. So she was basically self-taught. And she did it. She was self-taught in that she went to see great masters. When her father died, she was devastated and stopped painting. And her mother was at wit's end how to get her out of this terrible grief. And a friend who's an artist said, take her to see great masters. There were no museums at that time as we know them. All the paintings were in private collections. So her mother, through her husband's connections, and got Vigée not only permission to look at the paintings, but to work in the galleries. In other words, to copy whatever she wanted from those paintings. And that's how she taught herself. She was basically self-taught. That's how she learned how to paint. And I think I mentioned before, she never stopped learning. She went wherever she went to galleries and looked at great art. She also became very interested in nature and painted over 200 pastel drawings of nature. She loved Switzerland. She went there twice just to create paintings. So I do want to emphasize that she was self-taught and that she really never lost her interest, even into her old age, when she didn't get commissions. She didn't want to accept commissions, but she went into the countryside. She bought herself a house in the country, and she went into the countryside and she would sketch. Yeah. So, and her art, one other thing, her art gave her comfort in times of stress, and there were many times of stress in her life, and gave her happiness, even in spite of the tragedies that she suffered.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make a point of that.
Yeah. Thank you for
very
that.
Important.
Thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to me about the book and writing and the research that you put into it. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much to Judith for joining me to talk about this biography. I really enjoy biographies, and I haven't read one in a long time. I've read a lot of memoirs lately, but not as many biographies. So it was fun to learn about a person that I really didn't know very much about, but a person who had an incredible life and did a lot of amazing things. And holy cow, did the woman paint. Like, I had no idea that in my mind, portraits took a really long time. I was talking to my mom about this on Sunday after the interview, and I was saying, in my mind, it takes a really long time. It would take me years, but it still would take, I don't know, maybe I thought 3 months. And no, the number of portraits Vigée Le Brun painted even in a month was astounding to me. And the number of people that she painted, I'm just fascinated. But as Judith was saying, if pick up a copy of the book, and there's a lot of images of Vigée Le Brun's portraits in there, and they're really lovely, and you'll probably recognize some of the ones of Marie Antoinette, but her other portraits as well. Just go and look at the way she captured their personalities and the different ways she painted her subjects, and see what you think if you like her style, if you understand what she was going for with her style, etc. It's a lot of fun, and I enjoyed that there were so many pictures of the portraits in the book. But if you are a fan of biographies, if you maybe are a fan of this time period of history, if you are interested at all in the French Revolution, if you are interested in Marie Antoinette and never knew about her favorite portraitist, then you really should read about Vigée Le Brun, because she did paint this time period of history and the people involved in this time period of history. So definitely go and check out this book. Thank you again to Judith for joining me. Thank you, as always, to you. I hope you'll join me for the next interview. I will be we're going back to fiction, and I will be speaking with author Bill Hillman about his book, White Flight. It is a companion to another of his books, The Old Neighborhood. So I'm looking forward to speaking to Bill about that. You can see there's a young man on the front. You can see boxing gloves. Maybe if you're looking, I don't know what size your screen is, but so the young man is a boxer, and this takes place in and around the Chicago area. I'm looking forward to speaking to Bill about this book, so I hope you will join me for that conversation on the next episode. In the meantime, as always, please do like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching the episode on. Helps it get out to more readers. Another thing that helps the algorithm is to leave a positive review. So grateful to everyone who has left a review. It really, really does help. Thank you for doing that. You can follow the podcast on social media. We're on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Love hearing from you. Come find the podcast, ask me questions, tell me what you're reading, etc., etc. Even just tell me if you're not reading right now. Sometimes sometimes reading slumps happen. They happen to me. Tell me what you're doing. Just feed my nosiness. Come and interact. I love hearing from you. But I hope you're having a really good week. Hope you had a great weekend. If you celebrated Valentine's Day, I hope it was lovely. If you're celebrating Mardi Gras today, I hope you're eating your weight in pancakes or chocolate or whatever it is. If you're giving up something for Lent, good luck with that. If you're taking something on for Lent, also good luck with that. It's hard to create those habits, even with the best of intentions. Sometimes we try to have a habit even for 40 days, but I wish you all the luck with whatever discipline you've either decided to give up or take on during the 40 days of Lent, if that is something that you do. But whatever you're doing, I hope that it involves plenty of time to get yourself lost in as many good books as you can stand up to. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.